Well, you have found the first in a series of television programs that's titled The Wiccan and the Pastor. I happen to be the pastor. My name is Kent Philpott. I'm pastor of a real church in Mill Valley called Miller Avenue Baptist Church. And we're going to be talking with Thea Bristlebroom, who is a Wiccan. And you're going to get to find out a lot about her. And hello, Thea, welcome to the program. And so we're going to get started. We want to know about you. The next program, it's going to be completely reversed. Thea's going to introduce it and find out about me. So the first two programs in our series, well, you're going to be introduced to the characters. All right. Anyway, Thea, thank you. We've actually known each other for about a year and a half. Been about
Yes,
that.
and I was running away from you.
Yeah, about a year and a half when you led a meditation because you're part, like we are, of the Marin Interfaith Council, and we got to meet you. And I said, I want to do a television program with this lady.
Thank you very much for offering me the opportunity to have conversations with you. That's one of my favorite things, is interesting conversations. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Thea. So now let's start with your background, your parentage. What can you tell us about your parentage and your?
Sure. So my father was Roman Catholic from a family of Southern Catholics in Texas and Louisiana area, going back along his family line. And my mother was Protestant, I think Presbyterian. I'm not entirely certain about that. I hope that Presbyterian is a variant of Protestantism. Anyway, so she converted to Catholicism when she married my father. And I have two younger brothers. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was a Catholic. I was baptized, but I was not confirmed. I left the church before I was confirmed. And it was actually part of the reason why I did that, was part of the process of learning about confirmation and so forth. And I may touch on that at some point if you'd like me to. I went to college at San Jose State University, and I have lived or worked just about in every city around the Bay Area. I love the Bay Area very much. I'm currently living in Martinez with my mother. My father passed away last year, unfortunately, just before COVID hit, which is a very odd thing. And I have been a witch for 30 years about. I call myself a Wiccan, but I also use the label witch. And it depends who I'm talking to, which way I describe myself, but I imagine there might be a few Wiccans or witches who might pick up on this. So I wanted to be clear that Wiccans are usually considered to be witches, but witches are not necessarily Wiccans. And we can talk about that a little bit more if you like. I was in my particular tradition of Wiccan religion, I have attained the status of being an elder. I am a 3rd degree Gardnerian. That's not going to mean anything to anybody unless you're a Gardnerian. And so what I prefer to introduce myself to people as is, first I say I'm a pagan, and then when there's a conversation about what does that mean, and then we get into more specifics, I may say that I'm a Wiccan. And specifically, Wiccans are interested in worshiping the cycles of nature, worshiping in the, let's say, I would say the seasons of the year, the phases of the moon, and the naturally occurring changes of nature is a big part of our religion. We also worship a goddess first, and most of us worship a god in addition to a goddess. And that's just because we see the images of goddess and god as being something that we can relate to. Okay. And so we like to have our worship in nature if we can, but most often we have to do it in the privacy of our own home. So we don't have churches. We don't have congregations. There'll be small groups that meet. I studied for about 2 years before I was initiated the first time into an eclectic Wiccan
Theo, how
faith.
old were you when this began, when that study began?
So I was just out of college. So I was early in the 1990s, and that was about 30 years ago. So I was in my 20s, mid 20s. And it's generally accepted that you wouldn't want to train or initiate someone who wasn't of legal age. And generally, we find that people don't tend to come looking for the craft until they're a little bit older. And we're not sure why that is. We do have a lot of younger folks that are interested in it. But when I say younger, at my greatly advanced age of 55.
Let me go back to your growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go to high school?
So this touches on some private information. So let me give a little disclaimer about that.
Okay.
So obviously Thea Bristlebroom is not my given name and not my legal name. And so I don't want to give too much details about my history per se. So forgive me if the following is a little bit more vague than you might like. But the reason for that is that my family is not pagan and they're not out of the broom closet. I am, and my legal name is known to a lot of my friends and so forth, so that's not an issue. But I don't want to direct any hating people towards my family, so I protect them by having what we call a craft name. But anyways, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was, for the first few years, in a Catholic school, a parochial school, and then went into general education, general high school, lower grades in high school in the Concord area. So Concord, Pleasant Hill area is where I grew up.
All right. Okay. And then you said you went to San Jose State.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you study?
Well, it's interesting because I walked in having done most of the work for an AA degree and not having much in the way of general ed to do left, which was a mistake. And I started in a Bachelor of Arts degree for, I don't remember, it was something Bachelor of Arts thing. And while I was there, I changed my mind and I wanted to become an environmental studies with a focus on doing solar design, retrofitting existing homes with passive and active solar, because I thought that would be, a really good thing to be doing, good thing, trademark. And it was very, very difficult because very late in the game, I switched horses, and a Bachelor of Science requires a lot of lab classes. And I was not prepared for that. So I wasn't too successful in my endeavor to get a degree. But, I don't let it stop me. I love to read and to constantly learn stuff. And I have a lot of interest in a lot of fingers in pies. One of the things that a friend of mine says about pagans is that we are not religions of the book. We are religions of the library.
Okay. So this is probably a silly question, but I always ask this of people. Did you do any sports when you were growing up?
I was just about to start doing tennis when I was about 11, and I had a hip infection. I had an infection in the ball and socket joint in my hip, and I had surgery, and it would have killed me if surgery hadn't been available, because an infection that deep in your bone is really bad news. And thank the goddess for modern medicine, because I survived it. However, it did limit my ability to do physical activity afterwards. So I didn't do any kind of sports, unfortunately.
Yeah. I remember seeing you a couple of times, and you had a cane. Or no, maybe not. That's not maybe the term you use, but I could tell something was structurally causing you some trouble.
Yeah, I do suffer from chronic pain for a variety of things, and so the cane is a part of my life, but it's not an everyday thing. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah. Okay. What perked your interest in paganism and Wiccan, into the craft? How did you
Sure.
get involved in that?
So I had decided that the Catholic faith was not for me uh, before I got confirmed. And I was still considering myself a Christian, but just not knowing, having not found a variety of Christian faith and practice that suited me. So I went to college and was introduced at college to a group of people who, I guess they were into psychic phenomenon and ESP and that sort of thing. Um, and I was very busy with my life. I didn't have a lot of time to, kind of be messing with that. But because of their interests, they were close friends of mine. I was able to kind of open my eyes a little bit more to there are other religions out there that are not Christian religions. And I hadn't actively considered that. I didn't grow up knowing anybody who was Jewish, for example, and definitely not anybody from the Islam faith. And I didn't really know anything outside of Catholicism. I probably could have benefited with a comparative religions class, but I didn't have that opportunity. And so the very first thing that hit me kind of was I got introduced to somebody who was a Wiccan, and I asked them all kinds of questions, and they were able to point me to a teacher. And the teacher they pointed me to just happened to be Gardnerian. If I had found a different variety of paganism, I probably would have done that, because it really was just whatever I found first.
Now, that's Gerald Gardner,
Mhm.
the founder of that. Someplace I understood there's about maybe 21 or so groups that could identify as Wiccan.
Really, 21. I find that amazing. I'm personally aware of what we call a subgrouping, British traditional Wicca, which would include Gardnerian and a few other things. And they're very, very closely related. And then there are some other things that I would consider pagan that are not, they may not choose to identify that way. And we should probably talk about the word pagan. Can we do that
Yes, let's
briefly?
do.
Okay, so when I'm saying pagan, I'm actually meaning neo-pagan. We just sort of are dropping the neo, which is
Yes, right, right.
new in Latin. So the new pagans, because there is no continuity, no continuous through time thread of pagans that I'm aware of that really have not had their tradition interrupted in some way. And I don't need to go into what ways those are. The only one I can think of that might be an exception to that is Zoroastrianism, which I know predates Romans and I know is still practiced today. I just don't know enough to know if they ever had an interruption. So the new pagans tend to be people that either are Wiccan or who are identifying, maybe New Age was a catchphrase for a while. And it's people that are not necessarily comfortable in the religions of the book, which are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And they're not necessarily comfortable in something like Buddhist practice. And so we wind up with a lot of people who are interested in nature, who are interested in a goddess, a female divine form, and people who are very woo-woo, let's put it that way.
What's
They're
that word, Thea?
woo-woo. It's a technical
Woo-woo.
term. People, and I'm not trying to put anybody down by that, but people who experience the world energetically and are not predisposed to find organized religion. They're more disorganized, if you will. And so when
Wow.
I say pagan, I'm not, it's a huge umbrella term that's like
Sure.
beyond umbrella. It's actually a circus tent term. It's got many poles and lots of canvas, and then there's an outlier. You'll find a lot of people under this term who are not necessarily very compatible. They may have, in fact, completely opposite belief systems, and the only reason they're under there is because they're not one of those other ones. So it's a catch-all term, and not everybody that uses that term means it in a nice way. So it can be sometimes pejorative. There is a group of people who prefer to be called heathens, so not pagans. They want their own identity, and that is heathenry. So I want to be really clear about that. Um, Things like an indigenous religion probably would be underneath the paganism term, but I wouldn't expect that those people, if somebody came to me and said, I'm a thus and such, but I don't want to be called a pagan, I would happily abide by that, because I believe in using the labels that people want.
Okay. Wow, that's quite an education you've given me.
I know.
Yeah, I appreciate. No, it's good. How did you get the name Thea Bristlebroom? Now I know Thea is derived from the Greek, and Theo is God, male God, and Thea is female God.
Exactly.
And so how did you pick Thea, or was it picked for you?
No, I chose it. It's important in our tradition, at least, and possibly in other pagan religions, that you get a name that you're known to the gods by. And in our religion, in my faith, in my particular version of this, I get to choose my own name. And I was going to go with Alethea, which is how a friend of mine pronounced it. And I always thought it was Althea, but whatever. And it turns out that someone else in my circle, when I was about to get initiated with that name, had that name already, and I had not known that. And so as I tried to say Alethea or Althea, something stopped me. And I realized I was going to change my name right on the spur of the moment to Thea. And I had already looked that word up. I already knew that it was the female goddess form. And that's actually fairly standard in Wiccan. You'll find a lot of people, a lot of women, who choose goddess names as their craft names.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
and Bristlebroom.
Now let's get to the Bristlebroom. That's the name that's interesting.
Bristlebroom was because I had been outed, which is not okay to be outed against your will. And
Okay, now wait a minute. I'm sorry, back up.
I'll explain. I had my legal name published without my permission, and it identified me as a witch under that name. And I didn't want that to happen. And so I got them to retract it, but then I had to give them an alternate name. And I decided I was feeling a little prickly, and I wanted to clean this mess right up. So I was a bristly broom, and that's what I chose. It's better than some, and perhaps not as dignified as others, but there you go. I'm stuck with it.
Well, that's okay. I kind of like the name, actually. it's now, you used a phrase earlier, Theo, you said out of the broom closet.
Yep.
Does that mean that's when you announced who you were and what you were doing?
Yeah, it's very analogous to gay and lesbian people, and I guess also transgendered and genderqueer folks, when they have to explain to their family, I'm not the person that you thought I was, kind of thing. I have something I haven't told you or shared you. They call it coming out of the closet. And so in the witchy community, it just became coming out of the broom closet, made sense to us.
What I'd like to ask, and if I ask a question, Thea, that you don't want to deal with, just tell me. It's okay.
Sure.
Because we haven't had the time to vet everything. We've talked quite a bit, but how? So you got interested in things that would be categorized as witchcraft to some degree, and then somehow how were you initiated? Were you part of a coven, or how'd that all work?
So when a person comes looking for information about paganism and witchcraft and all that sort of thing, one of the terms that they're commonly called is a seeker. So when I was a seeker, I had been introduced to a person, and that person vetted me, had a sit-down conversation with me, asked me questions, we talked about things, and they decided that I was an appropriate person that they would be willing to work with. Now, if they had said no, they may have been nice and pointed me at somebody else, or they may have just simply said no. At that point in time, they don't owe me anything really. But I was taken to what we call Wicca 101 classes that were being given by this person and their wife. So it was a husband and wife team. And they did have a coven, although I didn't know that at the time. And they were specifically looking to train people who were potentially good fits that they might then bring into their coven. But that wasn't promised to me at the beginning. That was something that I didn't necessarily even know about for a little while, because it was none of my business. Covens are very private things. But I was a student with this couple, probably, and a third person, a friend of theirs, probably for about 2 years, I want to say, before I was given an eclectic initiation. And
would you define that? You said an eclectic initiation?
Right.
What's that?
Yeah, what's that? That's a really good question.
Okay.
So I obviously am from a particular tradition. So for folks listening who understand this already, I don't want to be disparaging to either group, because I think both paths are valid. But in general, my British traditional Wicca point of view is that there is an initiatory path. It takes a witch to make a witch. And then there's the eclectic path where you can, we wouldn't say self-initiate, but we would say maybe self-dedicate to a goddess. And you are not always going to be able to find somebody to teach you or a coven to work with when you want. And there are a lot of areas in the country where, like in the Bay Area, we're very blessed. We have a lot of witchy things going on. It's not that hard. But in other parts of the country, it can be kind of a desert. And so you have to be patient. A lot of people will do it self-dedication into eclectic Wicca. So eclectic means a mishmash of all kinds of things. They're not following a set tradition. They're not necessarily doing things the same way anybody else would do. They may not follow just one particular pantheon. They may choose and pick from different pantheons. It's a little dicey, but you can do it if you're cautious about it. And they don't necessarily have a lineage that they're working with. So there aren't language is hard. Words are hard sometimes. They don't necessarily have somebody to initiate them and to train them. So they're self-taught. Okay. And I just want to reiterate, that is a totally valid path. It's just very different from the path that I'm on.
Okay. I just want to say we have a little under 5 minutes to go through.
Okay.
Yeah, you wonder how does this go so fast?
I know.
So you were a part of a coven, and you are today, I believe.
I have a coven of my own. It's
Yes,
undergoing
okay.
a little bit of a sabbatical at the moment.
Okay, now would you be described by people as the high priestess of your coven?
Yes, that is an appropriate title. In my tradition, we work in partnerships of male and female, and it's usually high priest and high priestess are not so much titles as they are the roles that get fulfilled during a circle, and they can be filled by anybody.
Okay.
But while people are students, I'm the only one who is able to fill that role, and so I would be always filling that role.
Okay. And so you have an ongoing coven right now?
Well, like I said, mine is on sabbatical with the COVID-19 thing.
Yes, okay.
So we haven't met in a long time.
Okay.
And when we come back together, we may find that there's a need to, life changes us, and we may no longer be a coven when we get back together again.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I may have to go out and train some students.
All right. I've been reading. I don't know if you know this, but I wrote a book several years ago, and it was titled "The Soul Journey: How Shamanism, Santeria, Wicca, and Charisma Are Connected." And it's
No,
actually,
you gave me a
huh?
copy. You
Did
gave
I
me a
send you?
copy. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I sent you a copy. Okay. And so I've been reading and about Wicca. And would you say that could you possibly say it is a connected somehow with shamanism?
That's a tough question. The word shaman I think of as belonging to a certain particular tribe, and it's a word that means a magical person. I would hesitate to use the word shaman, but I would say that there are similarities and a lot of techniques for altering your consciousness are kind of the same wherever you go. In that way, yeah, sure, there could be some shamanism in there.
Okay.
But I would say that the viewpoint behind Gardnerian versus shamanism, they are very different worldviews.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. There is a connection, and but but of course, very different. Um, so at this point, when you don't have the opportunity to be with your coven, a part of that, how do you express uh, your involvement in Wicca? What does that look for you right now?
So what it looks like right now is a garden. I'm growing things in the ground, and it's just for me personally, that's a very um, spiritually fulfilling. It feeds me in many ways, and I like doing that. There are also seasonal observations and full moon observations that I can do by myself. It's not as much fun. And it's more fun, I think, to go and be with a group of people, and I really long for that because a lot of our magical celebrations are in community, even
Right.
if it's just a community of 2 or 3 people.
One of the things I'm hoping to do in one of the programs down the line is, if you're willing, to describe what happens in a circle.
Hmm.
I've learned a little bit about it, but you know what, Thea, we've come to the end of our time. My goodness, let me look at my little clock here. So, well, I just have to say to everybody out there that this is program number 1, the Wiccan and the Pastor, and in the very next program, Thea Bristlebroom is going to ask me how I got where I'm at. All right, so be looking for it, and we'll look forward to being a part of that. So long.